You ever have one of those neighbors who seems to think the earth physically rotates around their lawn chair? Yeah, that's Marlene. Or as the HOA calls her, Vice President of Neighborhood Harmony. Or as I call her, Clipboard Karen with a God complex. Let's set the stage. I'm Alex, 25, recently moved back into my parents' house after finishing grad school, trying to save money while working a remote tech job. Chill neighborhood, quiet cul-de-sac, the kind of place where people mow their lawns aggressively passive-aggressively, if you know what I mean. My parents bought this house back in the early 2000s, long before the HOA was even a twinkle in someone's power-hungry eye. It's technically grandfathered in under different bylaws. The HOA still sends us newsletters, like they think there's some kind of shadow government. But legally, they've got less say over our property than a pigeon on the roof. And yet, they try. It started when my sister came home from college one weekend. She parked in our driveway, our actual, privately owned slab of concrete, and within 15 minutes, there's a knock at the door. I open it, and there stands Marlene. Shiny sunglasses, clipboard, matching pastel set that screamed, "I haven't worked a real job since the Reagan administration." "Hi there," she says, her voice syrupy sweet and full of subtle threats. "Just wanted to let you know that parking in the driveway overnight is against HOA policy." I blink. "You mean our driveway?" She nods, like I'm a toddler who just discovered the concept of a spoon. "Yes, honey. The aesthetics of the neighborhood matter. Driveways should remain clear unless you're actively entering or exiting. It's about visual cohesion." Visual cohesion. She actually said that. About concrete. "So you'd prefer the car be on the street?" I ask, glancing toward the curb where Old Man Jenkins' rust bucket pickup has been decomposing since Clinton was in office. "Well, technically, that's also a violation, but we have more leeway with street parking. It's just about maintaining a certain standard. I'm sure your parents would understand. Tell them Marlene stopped by. Tell them. Like she's delivering a royal decree. Like she thinks my parents report to her. Spoiler alert, they don't. Especially not my dad. Now, here's the thing. Marlene doesn't know much about my dad. Most people assume he's just some quiet, introverted guy who spends his time doing Sudoku and drinking black coffee. And that's mostly true. But what Marlene doesn't know, or apparently forgot, is that my dad has been an IRS agent for nearly 30 years. He's not just good at paperwork, he is paperwork. He once found a tax loophole so obscure it made a CPA cry. He's the kind of man who reads tax code like it's a thriller novel. And if there's one thing he loves more than meticulously itemizing receipts, it's rules, especially watching them backfire on people who think they're above them. But I didn't tell her that. Not yet. Because watching someone dig their own grave is a whole different kind of entertainment. The next day, I got home from the gym and saw a bright yellow notice taped. Yes, taped to the side of my car. It read, HOA violation notice. Vehicle observed parked in driveway during non-loading hours. Section 7, paragraph 4 of Community Parking Guidelines. Second warning will result in fines. Marlene B., Vice President. Let me repeat. My car, in our driveway, next to our garage, on our private property. I peeled it off and honestly laughed. The whole thing looked like it was printed off Canva by someone who thinks Helvetica is too aggressive. It even had a little HOA logo in the corner, a poorly cropped clip art of a suburban house surrounded by stars. So naturally, I did what any petty person with a Wi-Fi connection and a mild God complex would do. I made a copy of the notice, framed it, hung it in our downstairs bathroom, right above the toilet. A little motivational reading for guests. Marlene, however, was not amused. That weekend, I had some friends over for a barbecue. We were all parked. Yep, you guessed it, in the driveway. Not blocking sidewalks, not idling engines. Just normal adult humans parking their vehicles where it makes sense to park vehicles. Marlene walked by 3 times, each time pausing just long enough to take photos on her phone like she was building a court case against us. At one point, she even circled back to remind me, "You'll want to move those before 9 p.m. Third violation triggers a formal complaint. I smiled. Great. I'll make sure my dad gets that paperwork. He loves reading trash. She stiffened, like someone had just spilled wine on her tax return. Still didn't click for her. At this point, my dad was starting to take an interest. He's not the type to engage in drama, but something about HOA overreach activates a part of his brain that lights up like a Christmas tree. I think it reminds him of shady nonprofits or sketchy accountants trying to deduct their yacht as a business expense. You know, he said one evening, flipping through the HOA bylaws Marlene had printed and dropped in our mailbox. These are interesting. That's how you know he's plotting something. When my dad says something is interesting, it's code for I'm about to ruin someone's quarter. He pulled out his reading glasses, got out a yellow highlighter, and started marking sections. I didn't ask questions. I just popped some popcorn. Because this was about to get very entertaining. There's a particular sound my dad makes when he's deep into paperwork, kind of like a contented humming mixed with a low growl of judgment. Like he's mentally roasting every comma splice and legal overreach he sees. That's the sound I woke up to the next morning. He was at the dining room table, surrounded by a stack of HOA documents that looked like they'd been printed from the dawn of Microsoft Word. Highlighters, post-it notes, a mug that said death and taxes sitting next to an open binder. It looked less like a home and more like the set of a low-budget legal drama. So, he said, without looking up, your friend Marlene has been very busy with her little rule book. I poured myself a cup of coffee. You find anything fun? Fun? Oh, I found a legal. That's more entertaining. He pointed to a paragraph in the HOA document. Something about vehicle restrictions and property aesthetics, buried under a wall of vague language and semicolons. This clause, they can't legally enforce it on our property. We're grandfathered in under the pre-HOA zoning. They can make suggestions. They can write letters. But they can't fine us. And they definitely can't ban driveway parking. He tapped it once more for dramatic effect, like a magician revealing the final card. She's bluffing. And badly. Now, I would have been happy just to leave it there. Knowing she was wrong was enough. But not for my dad. No. He was already halfway through what he would later refer to as Operation Paper Trail. He started gathering every HOA notice we'd received for the past 6 months. Scanned them. Cataloged them. Labeled them by date and subject. If she wants to play government, he said, she better be ready for an audit. I swear the man was glowing. Meanwhile, Marlene was doubling down. Apparently, word had spread to her little HOA coven that we were uncooperative. The next weekend, we got hit with another letter. This one certified mail, like we were getting sued by a middle school student council. This time the tone was less syrupy and more acidic. Continued violations of community aesthetic guidelines may result in escalated action, including but not limited to legal review, property assessment, and potential fines per Section 8.2 of the Community Enforcement Mandate. Let's just pause here to appreciate how someone can use that many legal-sounding words and still say absolutely nothing. Escalated action sounds like something a Bond villain says before pushing a button. Anyway, my dad read it. Smirked, then pulled out a manila folder labeled HOA Nonsense, Volume 1. And this man wrote back. I'm talking a 4-page letter. Single-spaced. Footnotes. Citations. Attached county zoning maps. He even included a flowchart at one point, just because, as he put it, visual aids can be instructive for the easily confused. He concluded with, in summary, your enforcement attempts are invalid under both local municipal code and our property's non-HOA status. Continued harassment may constitute legal overreach or property interference. I suggest redirecting your attention to actual neighborhood issues, like the mildew on your clubhouse roof. He mailed it. Certified. Return receipt. Then sat back with the satisfied air of someone who just performed a mic drop in letter form. But Marlene? She was not done. A week later, we woke up to this. 3 orange cones blocking our driveway, with a laminated sign zip-tied to one of them that read, Temporary Access Restriction, HOA Maintenance Enforcement. It was like she'd promoted herself to Deputy Traffic Czar. I dragged the cones off to the side and texted a photo to our neighborhood group chat, where the messages started pouring in. Tony, 2 houses down. She did that to me last year. Said my garage door color was hostile. Jasmine, next block. She reported my son's lemonade stand for unlicensed sales. He's 6. Jared, the retired firefighter. She called animal control on my cat. My cat, who doesn't go outside. Turns out, Marlene had been making her HOA rounds like some sort of suburban tyrant with too much time and not enough hobbies. Her list of petty infractions was legendary. Mailboxes 1 inch too short, porch lights too warm-toned, even a scandal involving wind chimes. So naturally, we had a meeting. Not an official meeting, of course. This was more like a backyard summit. 12 of us. Lawn chairs, beers, legal pads, rage. And that's when my dad floated the idea. You know, he said, setting his drink down. There are legal standards for how HOAs operate. If she's been sending out fraudulent fines or acting outside her authority, that's mail fraud. That's a federal offense. The group went quiet. Then Tony raised his hand like he was in church. What if someone looked into her finances? My dad smiled, the slow, calculated smile of a man who hadn't been this entertained since Y2K. I'll handle it. I don't know what he did exactly. He never tells me everything, which honestly makes it better. He said it was just a little look-see, but knowing him, that probably involved spreadsheets, property records, and a database I'm not legally supposed to know he can access. But a week later, a letter arrived at Marlene's house from the IRS, stamped urgent. And that, my friend, was the beginning of the end. If you've never heard someone scream into a Ring doorbell at 8:03 in the morning, let me paint you a picture. Birds chirping, sprinklers humming, and then, what the hell is this? Marlene, bathrobe flapping like a cape of indignation, stood in her doorway, waving a letter like it was a live snake. I was watering the flowers out front, purely coincidental, of course, and watched her lose her last ounce of composure in full 4K resolution. Thank you, modern surveillance. She stood there for a solid 2 minutes, absolutely fuming, then stomped down her walkway, heels clicking like she was about to sue the pavement for emotional distress. She marched right to our house and rang the doorbell with the enthusiasm of a telemarketer on commission. My dad answered the door. Calm, cool, mug in hand. It said, "Audit me, I dare you." "Can I help you?" he asked, as if she were a confused tourist asking for directions. "I just received a letter from the IRS," she hissed, clutching it like it might detonate. "I don't know what kind of games you people are playing, but—" My dad raised a hand, polite but firm. "Marlene, I'm not playing any games. But if you've been filing HOA dues as tax-deductible charitable donations when they're not registered as a 501c3, that's your issue." She blinked. "What are you talking about?" Oh boy, this was going to be educational. Turns out, during my dad's little look-see, he found that Marlene had been not only sending fake fines to homes that weren't legally under the HOA's authority, she'd also been collecting dues from confused new homeowners and writing off HOA expenses as charitable contributions. Now, I'm no tax expert, but I'm pretty sure brunch receipts from Panera aren't deductible just because you talked about landscaping during them. And to be clear, my dad didn't report her. Not directly. He just submitted an anonymous inquiry about the HOA's tax-exempt status, attached a few documents, maybe highlighted a line or two in red, to help. 3 days later, Marlene's universe cracked open like a cheap lawn chair. And here's the best part. The HOA clubhouse, which, I should clarify, is really just a repurposed shed with delusions of grandeur, had been scheduled for beautification enhancements. Meaning, they were about to repaint it mauve and install a water feature that looked like a bird bath with LED lighting. But when the IRS letters started landing, the funds dried up faster than Marlene's social circle. Suddenly, the treasurer of the HOA, some guy named Brett who once tried to fine a neighbor for having 2 pumpkins on Halloween, resigned. No explanation. Just dropped off a flash drive and ghosted. Rumors started flying. One neighbor claimed Marlene had been pocketing a stipend for her role as HOA VP. Another said she'd used community funds to pay for personalized notepads that said "from the desk of the vice president." Me? I just watched. Sat on the porch, sipped iced tea, watered the flowers twice a day because it gave me an excuse to witness the chaos. By this point, Even the die-hard HOA loyalists had started to peel away. You could feel the shift, like someone opened a window in a stuffy room. Jared, the retired firefighter, put out a lawn flamingo wearing a shirt that said, "I park where I want." Jasmine's kids started selling Free the Driveways lemonade. It had a little drawing of Marlene with devil horns. Sold out every afternoon. The rebellion had begun. Of course, Marlene wasn't going down without a fight. She doubled her efforts. Started patrolling the neighborhood twice a day. Left notes that sounded increasingly unhinged. Your mailbox is a quarter-inch too close to the curb. Wind chimes may cause anxiety for noise-sensitive residents. Your hydrangeas are encroaching on public visual space. Public visual space. She was inventing rights for eyes now. But the more she fought, the worse it got. Because now people weren't just annoyed, they were watching her like hawks. Filing counter-complaints. Asking questions. Requesting financial records. And somewhere in the background, the IRS was quietly doing what it does best, taking its sweet time, but never forgetting. Then came the day of the emergency HOA meeting. Everyone was invited. Technically. But this time, we showed up. The backyard of the HOA shed was packed. Lawn chairs, folding tables, people leaning on fences and sipping from travel mugs with the kind of energy usually reserved for local election debates. Marlene stood at the front, visibly unraveling. Her pastel blazer had creases. Her hair was frizzing. She was clutching her clipboard like it was a life raft in a storm made entirely of consequences. There have been rumors, she started, voice shaky. Malicious rumors. About impropriety and false allegations. Jared coughed, loudly, into his travel mug. Fraud. Marlene's eyes narrowed. I am trying to maintain order in a neighborhood that has clearly lost its moral compass. Tony raised his hand. Did you buy scented candles on the HOA card? She blinked. What? We found the receipts, Marlene, he said, holding up a printed sheet. Lavender mist and ocean breeze. $84. It was like watching a piñata realize it's about to get hit. Those were for ambience during meetings. Jasmine, meetings no one came to because you didn't announce them? It was unraveling in real time. Every petty fine, every fake rule, every shady transaction. Laid out. Itemized. One neighbor even brought a projector. So here's the HOA annual budget Marlene submitted last year, she said, clicking through slides like a TED Talk. And here's what actually went through the account. Gasp. Gasp. Collective suburban outrage. By the end of it, Marlene was gripping her clipboard so tightly I swear I heard it crack. And that's when my dad stood up. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. I suggest a vote, he said. Immediate suspension of Marlene B. from all HOA positions pending legal review. Anyone in favor? A sea of hands. Even Brett, the ghost treasurer, raised his from the back like he was making amends with the universe. Marlene turned to my dad. You did this. He sipped from his mug. No, Marlene. You did this. I just pointed out where the numbers didn't add up. After the vote, Marlene didn't storm off dramatically like you'd expect. No, she did something worse. She smiled. That tight, trembling, teeth-baring. I'm fine. Everything's fine. You're all wrong smile that a person wears when their entire pyramid scheme just collapsed in a church parking lot. This isn't over, she said. You people think you can bully me out of my position, but I built this HOA. I made this neighborhood what it is. I resisted the urge to ask if she meant miserable and overregulated or dysfunctional and overfinanced. It wasn't the time. Yet, she gathered her cracked clipboard, now with visible bite marks on the corner, unconfirmed if hers, and walked away with all the grace of a Roomba stuck in a corner. From that day on, the HOA was put under community reevaluation, which is code for, we're going to dig through everything she touched like it's a crime scene, because it basically is. My dad was unofficially appointed as the lead auditor, naturally, and I became his unofficial assistant, because I can scan receipts and run spreadsheet formulas like a caffeinated accountant with a grudge. We set up a folding table in the garage and called it the Situation Room. Printer, scanner, legal pads, sticky notes color-coded by category. Green, illegitimate fines. Blue, fraudulent expenses. Red, Karen grade nonsense. Every time we found something new, my dad would just mutter, interesting, which I had by now learned is dad code for this is going to absolutely ruin her. Now let's talk about the cherry on top. The driveway. Remember, this whole saga started because Clipboard Karen didn't like my sister's car in our driveway. It was never about rules, never about aesthetics. It was about control, about that tiny sliver of power Marlene clung to like it gave her meaning. So we decided to reclaim it, creatively. You know, that over-the-top kind of revenge that's just legal enough to be satisfying, but petty enough to make your ancestors proud? Yeah, we did that. First, my dad submitted a formal request to the city to update our zoning listing to explicitly state that our property is non-HOA governed. They approved it within days. Apparently, we weren't the first family to deal with Marlene's creative interpretations of neighborhood law. Then, we built a sign. A glorious, professionally made wooden sign mounted beside the driveway. Private property, not under HOA jurisdiction. Parking is not only allowed, it's encouraged. Park proudly. Park often. But that wasn't enough. I installed a motion-activated speaker under the mailbox. Whenever someone stepped on our lawn, it played a recorded message in my dad's voice. Reminder, you are now entering a driveway governed by common sense and actual property law. Please adjust your expectations accordingly. We also put little decorative parking signs up with my sister's name on them, and one that just said, reserved for cars that annoy Marlene. Every weekend, we hosted small driveway parties, driveway tailgates, driveway karaoke. At one point, we had driveway yoga taught by Tony's wife, who wore a shirt that said, Namaste off my lawn, Marlene. The whole neighborhood showed up. It turned into a full-blown driveway renaissance. People who hadn't spoken in years bonded over their shared Marlene trauma. Someone brought a grill. Another brought speakers. The lemonade stand came back. It was beautiful. Meanwhile, Marlene had gone dark. No more letters. No cones. No late-night power walks. She was seen once, peeking through her curtains like a suburban Bigfoot, watching us grill hot dogs on what used to be her sacred parking zone. And then came the final blow. A full audit report, 47 pages long, courtesy of Dad. Complete with charts, transaction logs, quotes from municipal codes, and one glorious section titled, Creative Accounting and Other Fictional Narratives, a breakdown of HOA financial fantasy. We submitted the report anonymously, though honestly, it had his fingerprints all over it, to both the local HOA Oversight Board and the IRS, again. Just in case. 3 weeks later, we got mail. Not from the HOA. From the state attorney's office. Apparently, the IRS audit had uncovered discrepancies significant enough to warrant further investigation. Words like embezzlement, improper handling of funds, and misrepresentation of authority were used. And the kicker? All HOA activity was suspended until further notice. The entire board was disbanded. Marlene was done. But of course, in true Marlene fashion, she had one last act in her tiny tragedy. A for sale sign appeared on her lawn. Subtle. No balloons. No open house. She left the way she lived, overdramatic and underinformed. On moving day, I happened to be watering the flowers, again, purely coincidental, and waved as her U-Haul backed out of the driveway. She didn't wave back, but I swear, the GPS said destination, irrelevance. The day Marlene left the neighborhood, the HOA shed, aka the clubhouse, stood quiet, hollow, and oddly poetic, like an abandoned throne room after the tyrant's fall. No more bulletins typed in passive-aggressive Comic Sans. No more rules about mailbox heights, or shrub uniformity, or driveway vibes. The clipboard era was over. And the neighborhood? We thrived. It started small. Jared put up Christmas lights in August just because he could. Jasmine's kid added a third lemonade stand. One at the park, one on the corner, and one at the end of our driveway, renamed Freedom Juice HQ. Someone built a garden gnome army. Literal dozens. All facing Marlene's empty house like they were awaiting her final judgment. Even Old Man Jenkins, who hadn't spoken a full sentence to anyone since 2003, started waving at people. He rolled his rusted pickup out of the street, and parked it proudly in his driveway. No fines. No laminated warnings. Just a man, his truck, and peace. And me? I started parking sideways in the driveway. Just for fun. One time diagonally. Another time, 2 cars bumper to bumper like a vehicular totem pole. It was glorious. My dad. He was declared the unofficial HOA historian/overseer. Meaning, no actual power, but just enough influence to keep any future Karens from sprouting up like mold after a storm. He even printed out and framed the full audit report. It now hangs in the garage above the Situation Room, renamed the Karen Containment Zone. We kept the color-coded post-its. You never know when the next clipboard crusader will rise. But just when we thought the saga had ended, a little surprise landed in our mailbox. A handwritten letter. Return address. No name, just a P.O. box in another state. I unfolded it slowly, half expecting glitter, a curse, or perhaps a cease and desist written in lipstick. Instead, it read, I hope you're satisfied. Enjoy your precious driveway. M. I laughed. I laughed so hard I nearly fell into the hydrangeas. Because in the end, even after everything, the fake fines, the cones, the audit, the public implosion, Marlene still thought this was about a driveway. No, Marlene. It was never about the driveway. It was about respect, freedom, and the right to own a flamingo in a Hawaiian shirt without being threatened by HOA bylaws written in a font you found on Pinterest. It was about reminding the clipboard tyrants of suburbia that some battles can't be won with passive-aggressive notes and Xeroxed rulebooks. Sometimes, you pick a fight with the wrong driveway, the wrong family, the wrong dad. Weeks later, with Marlene's house sold and a new, blissfully normal family moved in, we held one final neighborhood event, the first annual free parking festival. We lined the street with balloons. Jared brought out the fire pit. Jasmine catered. We handed out custom stickers that said, My driveway, my rules, and t-shirts that read, Marlene tried to find me, and all I got was this legal precedent. Even the mayor showed up. Okay, not the real mayor, but Craig, who works at City Hall and once met the mayor's dog. Close enough. And as we stood there, grilling, laughing, watching a group of toddlers use the HOA shed as a bouncy castle backdrop, I couldn't help but smile. Because some victories are loud. Some are messy. But the best ones? They're petty, precise, and legally sound. So here's to the driveways. To the quiet rebels. To the neighbors who finally said, Nah, not today, Karen. And to my dad, the IRS agent who brought an entire HOA to its knees, armed only with a mug, a spreadsheet, and unshakable patience. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.